If you'll please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. Gene, if you'll lead us.
I will. Please begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. Roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Here.
Director Craven?
Here.
Director West?
Here.
Director Borchert?
Here.
Okay, and Steve will be coming in shortly, and he's going to have to leave in the middle of the meeting, and John Saragosa will step in. So John Saragosa as an alternate is here. Robert's here, and Andy Waters is here. So do I see any other alternates? Okay. Agenda review. Jeff.
Chair Mullart, staff would request that items 2 and 3 moved from the consent agenda to the regular agenda. Also on item 4, the Boscovich Farms appeal, we received an email from someone representing the attorneys for Boscovich. Apparently that attorney has to be in for some unexpected medical tests, couldn't make the meeting today, nor could, I don't think their consultant is here either. I think he broke his foot on the weekend, so they asked that it be moved to next month.
Well, it wasn't water skiing, was it? Tell us it's not water skiing.
It was Frank Bromachenko. I'm not sure how he did it. So they asked that be moved to July. That's all we have.
Okay, so we have two items, 2 and 3 moved into regular. Item 4 is going to be moved to July. Steve had indicated to me that he has to leave by 2:10 for a meeting in Thousand Oaks. Supervisor Saragosa will act as the alternate, but asked if we could move agenda item number 7 up because it's one of the items that he wanted to be a part of the process as much as he could. So what I'll ask is that we move 2 and 3, roll 4 as suggested by staff, and move 7 up as the first item after E, F, and the consent agenda will be one item. Anybody have a problem with that? A motion?
So moved.
Okay, and a second. Motion is second. No, hearing no objection. Okay. Public comments. Anybody have any comments for the board that are not on the agenda? Andy.
I just passed out Andy Waters, LPUG chairman, reporting on this morning's meeting to the board, kind of as requested, I guess. So this morning's meeting went very well. Not on this agenda item was the May 27th meeting when we discussed the GSP and moving forward and LPUG's involvement in that and what our role should be and how we should proceed forward. The meeting this morning, we discussed what we did last year when we came up with this 7-step program, for lack of better, and how we commented on every single letter and every single thing and took all that time. I think the group wanted to concentrate more on the tasks that you guys have assigned us, the allocation and sustainability or yield, and moving forward on that. So that was kind of the consensus of the group we kind of put up there. And then we did a lot of discussing about the GSP, the schedule of developing permanent tasks and how to move those forward as far as land subsidence, if that should be a policy decision that we make now based on the information that we have, or is that something that we should just monitor going forward, looking at our group and our situation where we don't have any issues like that, and how do we make policy decisions based on the information that we have now? And in the whole scheme of that, the adaptive management plan came up as far as if we don't have anything going on with land subsidence, we put it in our plan, we've noted it for the state, can we move forward on that with is that enough information, or how does the GMA foresee that happening? And when we do have our plan, we do present it to the board. Is that going to be a chapter in the GSP, or do you want it? So we thought it'd be better if we had our own chapter, if that could be referenced and blended into the whole GSP. That was our thoughts today. So
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, good. Thanks, Andy. Anybody else? Non-agenda item? Okay. Board communication on any items?
I have one, Chair. And it's maybe just an addition to what Mr. Waters just said. I attended LPUG this morning, and this is not a new idea that I've had, but one that I've been kind of mulling over, and it seems to me that the pace we have set staff on with this 1-year deadline of accomplishing the writing of the GSP is forcing staff in directions that I think are stressing the process. We are on a breakneck schedule that is perhaps going to cause us to be faced with making decisions that aren't very well informed. Issues that were laid out to us last month, for example, I think we're scheduled July to discuss key board decision issues, policy decisions. They're not small decisions, and they really, I think, need to be discussed with board knowledge of real technical aspects of. Mr. Waters brought up the idea of subsidence, and this item was discussed at LPUG this morning of, do we have subsidence? Where do we have it? Is it an issue of concern that is a relation to the development of our GSP? These kinds of policy decisions are not ones that I think we're prepared to make in July. I think that there needs to be more investigation about what we know and what we don't know, pull these things together so then the board can make informed decisions on these policy questions. And with staff on this timetable of meeting our directive of the 1-year development, I think the whole thing has become compressed and we're going to end up making bad, hasty decisions. So I would recommend and suggest that we step back off of that hard requirement and I think staff had mentioned at today's meeting, Kathleen said that staff had originally figured on it taking 3 years to write this plan. And I don't think that's out of whack given all the stakeholder comment we're going to be required to receive and it fold into the development of this plan. So I was asked that we kind of back off of that hard deadline and let's make sure we get all the information in front of us so we can make informed quality decisions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
I have somewhat similar comments, but I was going to make them under item 7, which
Okay.
is on the agenda, and I thought, excuse me, I thought that this time was for things not on the agenda, so I'll make my comments later, but
Okay.
I do agree with David.
Yeah, and I think it'll come up again when we deal with item 7, so then, we can talk about that. Okay, any other board comments not on the agenda? Or just board comments in general, I guess? Okay, consent agenda. We now have one item on the consent agenda, the approval of the minutes. A motion
So,
and a second.
Second.
Any discussion? Okay, so ordered. Let's go to item number 7. Steve, you're right on time then, okay? Gerhard, who's going to present this?
All right. Good afternoon. Gerhard Hubner, Watershed Protection District, be presenting this item. It goes to show if you step out and grab a pen, you find the order change a little bit. So this is our item number 7. It's our proposal to form a technical advisory group and GSP development stakeholder process. So I have a number of slides. Feel free to stop me at any time. And if you have any questions, I'm certainly happy to answer them. So as you recall, back in May, as one part of the item, our proposed plan to develop a groundwater sustainability plan within 1 year, you were directed us to provide some clarity on what the stakeholder involvement input might be. So for today's discussion, we've put together a proposal. The straw man's proposal. We're certainly open to additional ideas, but we wanted to put something out there for the board and the audience to consider. So as proposed, this, excuse me for the acronym, I wouldn't try to pronounce it in any way, but just trying to distinguish it different than some of the technical advisory groups we've had in the past. So I just threw on the Groundwater Sustainability Plan Technical Advisory Group. And that would be a technical advisor to the board with a number of activities assigned. including assistance with consultant services, scope of work, ranking that consultant, looking at the draft GSP outline, ensuring that that's adequate for the task that we need, assistance with compiling data, studies, reports, any other information that would be critical for making the GSP. Furthermore, it would be looking at some of the additional information that's out there, any geologic or hydrologic data gaps, technical questions that need to be addressed, or essentially stating that those exist. Reviewing, again, some of the information that the consultant would put together in terms of technical memoranda, draft documents, looking at the yield analysis, the monitoring programs, and so forth, looking also at the other groundwater allocation programs, their merits, and making some recommendations. And, of course, reviewing the draft GSP when it becomes available.
While you're on that one, could you go back one slide?
Sure.
I appreciate everything that's up there. The one area I just think that we want to emphasize is having this technical review committee actually do technical review and not slide over into policy and have us be doing policy. So when you get to the fourth bullet point, I would say review and evaluate other groundwater allocation systems, their merits, and create a list for us of the advantages and disadvantages of going basin specific versus not going basin specific. That's different than actually, I mean, once your technical review committee says, we think you should go to basin specific or you shouldn't go to basin specific, that's getting into policy. And they should be giving us technically the advantages or the disadvantages and others from a technical standpoint. I would just offer that as, I just want to correct what I would be looking for from the technical advisory committee while you're on that slide, for whatever it's worth.
Okay.
So looking at what we would look at some of the minimum qualifications, we would be looking at collecting or having a group of technical professionals with a degree, university degree, from a college or university, and a license from the state of California, and that they possess considerable knowledge or knowledge of geology, hydrogeology, engineering, or water resource, with a preference for being familiar with the water resources in Ventura County.
Yeah, part of this perplexed me, and it might just be that I'm not familiar with what all the different departments of the state of California issue. But why would it be a license from the California Department of Consumer Affairs?
That's where professional engineers and professional geologists, that's the licensing bureau,
Okay.
That's the oversight agency within the state.
Okay, thank you.
So we propose today that this membership mimic the board's representation, and our rationale as wisdom within the legislation, and we still think that is true, that it provides a broad section of diverse interests within the agency's jurisdiction. We also propose that for this committee to really function and efficiently move through some of the discussion items, that you limit it to a person of 10 persons or less, or within that group size, just to be efficiently function. Each board member would designate one representative and alternate. The alternate is just proposed so that we have consistent representation in case the primary member could not participate. Consultants that would meet the qualifications that we proposed in the earlier slide could serve in lieu of the individuals from the particular agencies. This is just a list. Again, you're familiar with it. One from United, one from the county. The cities would have a representative from the four. The water districts would choose their representative, and agriculture, similar from the Farm Bureau or the Agricultural Association. Furthermore, another proposal is that the addition of one public member or a member from a non-governmental or environmental organization to round.
Would the proposal be that that member also be a licensed professional engineer?
Yes, that I would have.
So they would all meet the same standard?
Agency staff would chair this group. We would also provide the administrative and technical oversight, the agenda, the minutes, some of the materials that would allow the group, in conjunction with the consultant that would be selected. We'd also be there, of course, to make sure the milestones and the technical evaluations are adequate under Sigma. They would meet a minimum of once a month. Of course, that frequency can go up depending on the need. It can be as frequent as a week. It could be every day. Depends on, again, the level of involvement. This meeting, since it is a creation of the agency, would be subject to the Brown Act, so there would be public notices made. Public would be allowed to attend. We would create a separate public comment agenda item. And as I mentioned, yes.
I disagree on the application of the Brown Act. I don't see this advisory committee as being any different than a consultant hired by this board. If we go hire Kennedy Jenks to do an analysis or CH2M Hill to do an analysis, they're not going to invite the public into their process. The Brown Act applies to legislative bodies. This technical advisory committee, as Director Bennett pointed out, is not going to be policy directed. They're there to review data and analyze data. That's not subject to the Brown Act. And I think it would be inappropriate to saddle that committee with that responsibility, to task them with having to take public comments or open their deliberations to the public. It's not a stakeholder process. It's a technical advisory committee. And I think you need to take another look at the Brown Act. It doesn't apply.
I'll defer to agency counsel on this one.
Well, my reading of the Brown Act is it defines the legislative body very broadly, and if this board acts to form a committee for the purpose of studying either technical or policy issues, that committee would be subject to the Brown Act.
Yeah, I disagree. And particularly since no board members are on the committee. It's not a committee of the board. And I'd be happy to share my research with you if you'd like, Al, but I'm absolutely certain the Brown Act doesn't apply.
If the Brown Act were to apply to this meeting, the Brown Act would also then, I would assume, would imply that the Brown Act would apply to any of the consultants that do conversations among 2 or 3 of the consultants saying, hey, what do you think about this? What do you think about... I mean, there's a certain amount of analysis that goes on and conceptual thinking that goes on as you start to frame a position. And I do know that at United we have tasked some very technical entities to look at the fish passage ladder, the reconstruction of the spillway and the intake works at the San Felice Dam. I mean, very technical stuff, and it's a large group. And I don't believe I don't think we follow the Brown Act process with them as well. So I would think, Al, we need to take a look at this, because I think if we go down the Brown Act rule on this one, it has implications on the process of actually trying to come up with something that we present to the board. The decision will be made at the board level.
One of the reasons I want to be very careful about this, to be honest, is the last time there was a technical advisory committee, they got bogged down in Brown Act compliance and public interference with the technical evaluation process, and I don't want that to happen this time.
And I would be happy to take another look at that issue. I don't think it should affect your board's decision-making process today. It's a legal matter whether it would or would not be subject to the Brown Act, but that can be looked into after today.
Charlotte.
I was just going to say that the city attorney for Camarillo agrees with Al. The only committees that, the only committees we don't have to post and everything are ad hoc committees. are specified in the Brown Act. This would not be an ad hoc committee, it'd be a standing committee because it'd be there for a long time. And like our planning commission doesn't have any council members, neither do any of the committees we appoint for anything else that don't have council members, but we still require them to be part of the Brown Act. I think that even if it were not legal, required by the Brown Act, we might want to, for the purpose of transparency, want to consider having them posted and have the public allowed at the meetings and have public comments. Public comments are for non-agenda items.
Well, Steve?
If I could, a question I have for Director West is, one is you're questioning the interpretation about the Brown Act, but are you also suggesting the meetings would be closed to the public?
Yes.
I don't know whether the Brown Act applies, and I'm willing to have that be looked at. I think I would be very uncomfortable saying that the public cannot observe the discussions. Now, we may say the Brown Act doesn't apply, but the public can observe the conversations, and there may be some benefits to not, quote, getting bogged down in, well, we have 30 people that want to speak, and so we have to take that. That I could appreciate, but I wouldn't be comfortable saying that these are going to be, because they will be perceived, or they can be portrayed as, quote, secret meetings about water, and we may not think that that's the case, but anyway, that would be an issue. So I would err on the side of transparency from that standpoint. I'd like to hear more about the issue of the Brown Act for whatever it's worth.
Well, I think it's raised an interesting question. Al, you have a task, and at some point at the appropriate board meeting, you're going to report to us. So, can I just, since we got in this issue just for a second about public input, stakeholder input, and the like, if you go through, if as I've read the staff report, what essentially it's saying is we're going to create a technical committee. It has to be technical people to deal with the technical side of the equation. I think Steve is right when he said that that technical committee needs to not make policy, but allow the board to make that policy. Then we got into a discussion about how open or transparent we are with the public. So I'd like to kind of jump to that and make sure we balance both sides of these. And if I may, before you kind of jump
That's
ahead.
my next slide.
Okay, let's do that then.
So, flipping the other side.
Let me interrupt for a second. Jessica, Dave just walked in. Dave Schwabauer just walked in.
Okay, so under SIGMA, as we've described to you previously, it encourages a broad public participation, in fact requires it. We also believe that an active, engaged stakeholder and interested parties is essential for the successful development of this GSP. As we presented previously, of course, you have the board meeting itself as the at-large public outreach forum. We intend to schedule a public workshop next spring or next summer as we get closer to the draft plan. Of course, we also have our committees. We have the executive, fiscal, and operations, and they can be scheduled as needed. So beyond that, these are the next two slides. So to effectively meet the one-year time frame, we encourage the active participation, but we're kind of looking to see if there can be 2 or 3 groups that we can effectively engage. Too many groups, consultant services us, how can we meaningfully engage them, knowing we want to receive that public input and respond to it. As you know, LPUD exists, it actively meets on a regular basis. In the past, there have been other groups, the M&I group and the Oxnard Plain user group. My understanding is they no longer meet on a regular basis or may not exist at all. As you're also aware, back in June, or last week actually, Friday, Farm Bureau organized a workshop. They had this particular item up for discussion. In fact, I seated the audience with the discussion and asked them for ideas on what they might want in terms of the group, whether it's on the Oxnard Plain, provide a consensus voice, or perhaps Pleasant Valley or something along those lines for the Plains, since that seems to be an area that's lacking in terms of an organized effort. Similar group might need to be for M&I. In any event, we're open to any transparent and open process that's efficient. We also have to do something SGMA requires, that we do a written statement. So prior to developing the GSP or the initiating development of the GSP, we have to make available to the public and DWR a written statement describing how the parties may participate in the implementation of the GSP. Send it to all the cities located within the agency in the county, and so whatever, if you decide to approve a process today, we would immortalize that in this written statement. So in conclusion, we provided you with a proposal today for a forum and a technical forum, as well as interested parties' ideas on how we can get stakeholder involvement. This, of course, by forming the technical advisory group, it would have the added benefit of allowing us to move towards our target of a draft GSP in 1 year. We provided this proposal on the technical advisory group, and of course we're open to any ideas that you may have to modify this proposal, adopt it, or another proposal. With that, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, with that, let me, if I may, Steve, you've got some time limits, so if I'll ask that if you have comments, now's the time to do that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. And that meeting that I was trying to get to last time, it's today now because I didn't end up going last time. So thanks for moving this item up. I'd just like to talk about three things real quickly here. One, sort of this 1 year goal in terms of trying to go to that. I want to remind us, we had this conversation last time. I remember Director West and I think sort of reached agreement that we may not make it in a year, but if we don't set up a goal, it'll just keep getting kicked down the road. As I do want to remind us that we are in a period of overdraft. We know we've got to bring some numbers down in terms of our pumping while we also try to get supply. As long as that situation is going to be there's going to be significant pressure for us to delay. There will be strong voices for delay that will be out there as long as we're in the situation where people know there's going to be some difficult things implemented. Second thing is when the drought sort of exploded on everybody's radar screen a year ago last winter, if you remember, when we didn't get rain again. And this organization was blasted by many people from the podium, many people that were in the audience, that we weren't doing enough, that we had delayed, we had kicked the can down the road, and I remember that, those coming on pretty strong. So if we don't have a goal to try to move us, I think it's very likely we'll get 3 years down the road, as referenced. If we say, well, we can just do it, we'll get 3 years down the road and we'll still have arguments for delay. So it's a goal that can always slip. But it will not happen if we don't set up the goal. And if we don't have the goal, I think we'll crawl, number one. And number two, I think we'll be perceived as an agency that wants to kick the can down the road and go slow. So that's my sense about why we should hang on to the goal. I don't want to make a hasty decision. I don't want to make imprudent decisions without information. But you also don't want to never ever get to the point. There will always be additional data that we could get. In terms of stakeholder input, I think staff has come up with a good, reasonable suggestion for the technical committee, one that represents. I would suggest that we each, because the way this agency was set up, so that the cities recommend a technical person, the county recommends a technical person, the large water users, the small water users, and the agricultural interest all recommend a technical person, so that we know each one of these different groups is there. In terms of the stakeholders, I have been scratching my head on that. I think, I know at the Farm Bureau hearing it was brought up that private property owners should be the only people there. I don't think that went over real well with a bunch of people that were at the meeting. I think if we try to identify, you are the stakeholders and you're the ones that have the input, we're not capable of that, and we're sort of picking the winners and the losers. I think that what we should do is set up a process where anybody who views themselves as a stakeholder has an opportunity to give us their input. This kind of forum has actually worked well for that, and that way we're not loading it up and we're saying, well, there's 2 from the cities or there's 3 from so I would propose that we know we meet on Wednesdays, that we start to carve out some time just for the plan creation on Wednesdays, separate from this meeting. So then people could decide, I want to be there for the plan creation part of it, or I want to be there for the regular agenda part of it. But we've all blocked our schedules out. We're all, we know we have this on this day. So I would propose something like, the details can be worked out, something like we meet at 11 o'clock and we say for 90 minutes, from 11 o'clock to 12:30, we're going to meet. 12:30, we're going to break for lunch. We come back here at 1:30 and we do our regular board agenda. But everybody knows we're going to do the creation of the sustainability plan from 11 to 12:30, and then we decide if we need more time, we need to have other special meetings or whatever. So those are my thoughts, and then those meetings can be when anybody views themselves as stakeholders. The one other thing I would add is, I think we should direct our staff to try to encourage people to form themselves into stakeholder groups so that they speak as a united voice. That, the Oxnard Plain, if we can get the Oxnard Plain ag, users to speak, that's healthy to the extent that they have conversations and work things out amongst themselves. But we don't actually identify, they are an identified group any more than what the state legislation talks about in terms of us keeping it. So that's my proposal or suggestion. So I don't know what other people's thoughts are about that.
Charlotte?
Yeah, I had a couple of questions. One of Gerhardt and regarding the. It was a few pages back, but it said that staff would chair the tag, the new tag. I'm going to call it the new tag because there's no pronounceable acronym there. And that's different than most things. So why would staff chair it as well as act as staff to it?
That's just a role we've actually had in the past. We chaired the SAG, and I believe the former incarnation of the TAG, we chair that.
Okay.
I chair the Stormwater Committee for the district for the stormwater program. So it's not a unique role that we're not familiar with. It's just a matter of allowing the conversation versus assigning it to somebody else. Of course, you couldn't decide to make somebody else, of course, the chair, but that was essentially our proposal.
Okay. I have a different way of answering that. It's an offer. It's just an offer. There's a lot of work that goes with that.
Yeah, it doesn't, other than a title, Jeff said it does.
If I could, I'd ask the question, who else? I mean, anybody else would be perceived as having a particular...
Right. It was different than the way we do it in our city, so I just thought I'd ask.
Okay.
Second question is, we keep talking about 1 year. We first talked about 1 year in April. I assume you talked about 1 year last month. We're talking about 1 year now. Is the 1 year going forward from whenever we're talking about it, or is there a one time? Is it 10 months now? I don't know.
Well, I'll answer that. It's from when you approve the work plan. That's
Okay.
when the 1 year clock starts.
Okay.
That's how I would answer it.
And the third thing is the comments I had written down about the timing, and I wasn't part of the conversation last year, and if a vote was taken to do it in 1 year, then that's fine. But if you did do that, then I would hope you consider that until next June, the Department of Water Resources isn't going to have its regulations and its technical criteria adopted. And I think we need to have that for consideration before we start doing a whole lot of work, or we could be doing double work, it could be costing us extra, and in the long run, take extra time.
That issue actually was part of staff's presentation and a discussion on that. And there is a number of the one they used, the University of California, Davis their water gurus up there have outlined what a plan should look like. And my sense is what the state is doing is pulling in a lot of those outside recommendations. So I think the discussion basically was that the essence of the plan is going to have some key elements. What is your sustainability? What is your allocation? What's your solution to bring in new sources of water? And how are you going to control the demand side? I mean, those are the key elements. Now, there's a lot of little minutia reports that are going to come out of that process, and they can always but the real heavy lifting, and I think what I tried to generate when we came up with the concept of the 1 year is we need to put the tasking out on the really heavy lifting items. We heard from Andy today that LPUG has shifted a little bit of its direction, that getting a plan, getting a sustainability allocation, getting a sustainability, looking at what systems they need to put in place to backstop the supply side and control the demand side. They're now focused on that. I've heard from growers that because of the presentation that LPUG made a couple months ago that Brian made a couple months ago about their allocation scheme, it's now refocused the Oxnard Plain. So if we can get the cities, the ag community, LPUG, the Oxnard Plain, and other areas focusing on the two key issues, that is sustainability and allocation, I think we've actually moved a major portion of the plan forward. The only thing we're going to do different is we're going to do the tag function. The proposal is to do the tag function in a more controlled way and not the free-flowing thing that we had before, which I think you were right, that it became a lot of discussion, but not a lot of technical discussion, and it was frustrating. I know the feedback I got from folks at United was, this is very frustrating because we're educating and not solving and not coming up with the things that we've been trained to do. So if we can solve the tag issue, I think we'll be in a healthy position. The 1 year issue, and I agree with Steve, and I agree with Gene, I agree with Dave. The 1 year is a goal. The number one criteria in this whole process is we have to come together as a community to write a plan, to believe in the plan, and make the plan work. If we don't do that, the attorneys will have a field day and all bets are off and the whole thing will come crashing down our head. That's the reality of the world. So if in the meetings that we have, we don't get the discussions that we need, or we don't have the answers we need, and we have to set up a special board meeting or a special workshop or additional board meeting, we have indicated that we'll do all those things. So just because we've set a 1 year date doesn't negate the fact that we will spend the time and energy to get the answers we want. They're going to have to be in the right sequence. And we may not have 100% consensus, as Steve has pointed out. Getting 100% consensus may not be the result. But his proposal to actually make a time certain of, and his proposal, 11 to 12:30, we can work on the time, and have a time certain to update everybody, to let the public have an input on the sustainability process, I think is a good idea. My fear is that we will not even get close to a 1 year point if we game the system. If the board games the system by not having a public process, if the board games the system by controlling meetings so that there are very few meetings, if a certain group games the system because it's very selective in what they want, we could easily game this system all across the board and be where I think would be a disaster, and that is a couple years down the road and have no answer. And I have pushed for this primarily because there are a lot of moving targets. One of the moving targets is, and Al answered the question because I think Dave, you asked Al the other day or the last meeting, can we in fact go out and generate a replenishment fee if we don't have a plan? And the answer is no. So to get to the supply side of the equation, to offset the work that we're going to have to do or to minimize the work we have to do on the demand side means we have to have a plan. So if we don't have a plan, we don't have funding. If we don't have funding, we don't deal with the supply side, and the only tool in our bag is regulations and restrictions of pumping, which I don't think everybody wants. No one really wants. We have to work both sides of the equation. So I personally am not afraid of the 1 year because I recognize it can slip. It will allow everybody to have discussion if we follow the proposal that Steve has outlined or something similar to that. A time certain where we deal with that issue, and then we deal with all the other issues that are part of our normal course of activity. And all of us have sat through these meetings where we get bogged down in all kinds of hearings and other little, the minutia things, and we don't get to the meat of what our responsibility is. The Sustainability Act is the meat of where we need to go. The allocation is the key to it. Getting the plan in place is the key to getting funding in place to build the projects. If United or some entity today decided to build a project, it's 10 years before we bring that project on board. That's the regulated process. I mean, you guys brought your new desal plant on board. United's been working for 15 years on the fish passage at the Freeman. It took 15, close to 20 years to bring that project on board. We don't have that kind of time. If we say we have that kind of time, then the answer is it's purely on the demand side, and that means more cutbacks, more regulations. So and I know Steve's got to run, and I want to hear from other board members and folks in the public, so that people kind of have a sense of where I think we ought to go, and we can chew on those issues. So please.
All right. I agree with you and with Director Bennett. We won't benefit from delay, but we will benefit from being deliberate, and I think that's the intention. At the risk of revealing my age, I think it was President Eisenhower who cautioned his staff often to make mistakes slowly, and we'd be well advised to follow that advice. What's that? I am. Yeah, that's true. That's with respect to the Technical Advisory Committee and the stakeholders process, I certainly do want to see each developed separately. I don't think the technical advisory process should be part of the stakeholder process. And with respect to the makeup of the Technical Advisory Committee, I think it should be a little broader. I certainly like the proposed format, but I think we can broaden it. I don't think we'll run the risk of having a committee so large that it's unworkable, because inevitably with a volunteer committee like this, you're going to lose about a third of the people at every meeting because they won't be available. And from the list of tasks that need to be accomplished, based upon the likely experience and background of the various members of the committee, I could see them dividing themselves into groups so that certain issues are dealt with by one group of engineers, other issues by other groups of engineers. If we make it a group of 5, then only 5 people have got to deal with everything, as opposed to a broader group with broader expertise that can subdivide the tasks. And in that respect, I think, for example, there's various different environmental organizations in this community that should be invited to get together and propose engineering staff to participate. Similarly, Callegas is a big stake and a lot of professional engineering staff. They should be invited to designate somebody for the technical advisory group. And I think there are others. It wouldn't offend me at all if the total size of the group was 14, 15 engineers, because I think inevitably you'd wind up with 3 or 4 groups of 4 or 5. Those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Director West. I appreciate that larger size concept, but I am wary of just having it too open. And one of the things I circled here on minimum qualifications was possess knowledge of water resources. Well, we all here possess a certain amount of water resources, but I don't think any one of us is terribly technical. And I think that we really ought to keep it honed in to geologists, hydrogeologists, engineers, professional people, licensed professional people who do this for a living, because that's what we're requesting of them. We're requesting a review of their technical data. In essence, this is kind of a technical peer review process that it's part tech peer review, part stakeholder, because these very professional people also work for entities that have a stake in the process. So I would think that we should continue to keep it focused on that professional qualifications. In terms of each board selecting an individual or a couple of individuals, that it may overlook the possibility that we ought to have the different basins represented, if at all possible. I'm thinking of the Santa Rosa Basin, the Las Posas Basins, the Oxnard Plain, the Ford Bay. Irrespective of board member preference, I would hate this to turn up into a kind of a turf situation where we're all kind of making appointments that kind of represent our interests instead of actually reviewing the technical data and giving us the information we need. Because that's really what we're asking for, is an advisory look of what our plan is saying. Regarding the concept of delaying, I'm sensitive to that as well. It's been a thing that's kind of stung me as well when we hear those complaints from the audience. At the same time, this one-year goal, I believe, is unreasonable and unrealistic. And by adhering to this rigidly, we force staff into a position of doing things very quickly and not being deliberate. And I think that's a problem. That sets up a flawed process from the beginning. And so, yes, let's have a goal. Let's set a new goal. Let's move it from a year to, 2 years, a year and a half. But let's consult with staff. Let's see what they think they can do realistically, instead of forcing this deadline on them that we think is what's best. Regarding the stakeholder process, I appreciate Director Bennett's concept of how to go about that, and maybe that's a good way. It seems to me that perhaps the agency ought to write a draft of the plan and then submit it out for public review, an extended period of time, similar to like environmental impact reports of that nature. We have a number of meetings, we take comments, we put those comments back into the hopper and rewrite things and come up maybe with a second draft. Maybe there's a process of drafts that the entire public is able to comment on and weigh in on, and maybe that's moving the ball down the road in a more efficacious way, instead of having comments on a monthly basis that maybe it just gets too unwieldy to manage for staff. I think that wraps up what I have to say.
Steve, are you going to? Okay.
I guess listening to all this, the two things I would respond to are when you talk about trying to have technical people from each basin, and you talk about 14 people being there, I'm not opposed at all to people having input, having technical experts there, et cetera. But I am concerned about, how do you manage it? And some people will be there because they're there for a particular slice. They know a lot about that particular basin. They want to comment on that, but they don't necessarily. So they should have input then, but not necessarily be part of the technical committee for the whole implementation of the plan. That's my own sense. So I would be inclined to say, let's stick with staff's recommendation with a broad invitation for lots of other experts to be a part of the process. It's just when you actually try to create this voting entity. That's how I would bend that. And then the other thing about the 1-year goal, just to go back to that, you said if we rigidly adhere to it, and I think you're hearing all of us say we're not rigidly adhering to it. We're trying to set out enough of a goal to move us down the road, but it's not a rigid goal, because you say if it's rigid, then staff's going to be forced to do things when they're not ready. And all of us are saying don't do that, but let's go ahead and go forward. So I think we should. I think. Could I ask? I mean, are people in general this idea of meeting, twice on Wednesday? Is that? I didn't.
Yes, ma'am.
Just curious.
As the only one who has another government meeting following this, I have to leave at 4:30 to get to it. And as part of a government body that seems to have a way of going till midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning consistently, I would ask not to do it the same day.
Okay.
For as long as I'm on the board, at least.
Well, let me change it. The concept of having a specific time and place for stakeholder input.
I think that's great.
Okay, so if I take Dave's comment and Steve's suggestion and your comment, Dave's suggestion is rather than having a stakeholder series of meetings where we kind of stare at each other and go around and around in circles, his comment was maybe we ought to have staff take its first cut at a draft. And then when that draft process starts and staff actually has something to show, then we could start with a specific stakeholder meeting on that draft, and that's when the stakeholder meeting process starts moving down the road, with the understanding that whatever staff submits is purely a draft and purely a starting point, not to be adopted. We won't make it an action item to be adopted. We'll protect everybody from that game that the board could play. We'll make it, but we'll do it with a very specific meeting process. So we actually get what you were looking for and what you were looking for, and that is a separate time and place.
I don't know, why don't we at the appropriate time, maybe we should ask the public what they think of the process, because it'd probably be nice to have a draft to kick around as part of that process, but a lot of times people feel left out if there's a draft, even a conditional one, if there's a draft on the table before they had an opportunity to participate.
Okay, that's a great segue, and at this point in time, I will open up to the public.
Let me just make one more quick one.
Andy, hold on a second.
And that was a comment to Director Bennett's previous comment. Staff's between a rock and a hard place here. Board's saying, well, yeah, we have this year-long deadline, but it's flexible. And staff hears they got a year deadline. And you got to give it one way or the other. They're trying to follow our direction, but this kind of loosey-goosey thing of, yeah, you have a deadline, but you don't really. I think we just set a new goal. That's my opinion.
Okay. Hello, John. Good morning. Good to see you, as always. Andy. Uh-oh, a second handout. This is dangerous.
Andy Waters, LPUG chairman. This is our new streamline so that we don't have to direct letters to Gerhardt every single time we have a meeting over the proposed staff agenda and go round and round. So we're just trying to streamline that. That's why I'm passing out the notes and what we're talking about. And I think we need to get back on top of it a little bit more. We're talking about TAC right now and all that stuff. And at our discussion this morning at LPUG with 40-some people there for a couple hours discussing the TAC committee and how it should be, these are our bullet points that we came up with as a group. You know, we put them all up on the screen. We discuss it. These are the top three things that came out. You know, the board has adopted basin-specific plans. We think the TAC needs to represent that. You know, pretty simple stuff. So instead of going back to the letter that went out and going line by line through it all, this is what we came up with. We agree with Director West that the TAC needs to be non-Brown Act. It needs to be a group that you guys can go to and ask questions and vent those technical situations. However it's formed, 10 or 5 or whatever. That's to be determined. We have the stakeholder group. We have an ad hoc group, LPUG. You could have Oxnard Users Group. You could have the Mound Group. You could have the Pleasant Valley Group. However we form those places for the public to vent and talk and discuss, then it goes to the TAC, and then it ultimately comes here for the public comment. And that's all we have to say about that today.
Okay.
Any questions?
Questions for Andy? Okay, thank you, Andy. Anybody else?
Jeanette Lombardo, California Food and Agribusiness Advocates. Just a point of clarification to Gerhardt's presentation. As I came in front of this board on April 22nd and informed you that I was in the process of forming the Oxnard Plain Users Group, the group, that did not stop. We had a formation meeting on June 12th, and we have enough acreage representative that we feel we have critical mass, so we have moved forward with structure, studying our hydrology, and self-funding the group. So I would like I told Tolly, but I don't think it was communicated perhaps to Gerhardt. That has been done, and we are moving forward. We do have separate groups that are meeting. One is the mutuals, one will be the cities, and one will be the ag pumpers. We are scheduled to have a meeting this coming Tuesday. Additionally, in regards to the TAC, I want to talk about, I agree with a lot of what was said. I do think it needs to be non-Brown Act. The reason for this is I think if you get too many folks in the room, especially attorneys, the technical folks may not feel freely to be able to talk and to solve the problems that we need them to solve. Secondly, I think we do need to have representation from every basin. It's great to have them in the room and giving impact, but as far as making the decision and moving forward on the technical direction, we want everyone to have a voice in the process. That's all I had to say. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Anybody else? Interesting. Okay, I wrote down, John, you've been listening in the audience. You have any comments?
No, on the Brown Act, I think the board counsel is probably going to give us some information on that, as to whether it should be a Brown Act committee or not, and that's, basically what we're going to do, right, is get counsel come back.
Yeah, we got here. Okay, so see if I can put some summary to this so we can move this thing along. Here's what the issues that I've heard from board members and a few comments, and as always, if somebody gets a burning issue they want to say somewhere along, just come on down. A timeline, I'd heard about timeline. I heard about groups. I heard about meeting date. I heard about specific meeting dates and time for GSAP. I heard about the tag, and I heard about stakeholders. So let's see if we can come up with some concept to put this together. Dave's argument is that staff right now is running to a 1 year, even though they've heard us saying it's flexible, and that is confusing to staff. Let me ask staff.
It's not confusing at all. Red Adair once said, I can do it fast, I can do it well, or I can do it cheap. Pick any two. What's going to happen with the two that you select will become apparent as the process moves forward, and you'll have that choice available to you in the event you set it at 1 year. So it might be you have to spend a little more money to make the year. It might be that you don't want to make the year, but it's not confusing to us right now. We're putting a work plan in front of you that will get us where we think you need to be in a year, and we'll see if we can make it.
And it still leaves us the flexibility if the other issues that we've all said, that I've heard all the members say, we want input, we want to make good decisions, and we want to make sure that we do this in a logical sequential way. So at any point in time when somebody feels like that in fact is not happening, either from the board or from the public, we have the authority of the board to change that balance you just outlined.
That's right. You're balancing quality, cost, and schedule. And that's something that's not easy to do ahead of time. You kind of know. But any time along the way, if you feel like one of those is out of balance, you can call us to task on it.
Okay. All right.
Excuse me, Chair. Again, and I'm not trying to hammer on staff, and I appreciate your answer, Jeff, but right now we're being given a process of tasks based on accomplishing the goal in a year. And that's the problem. For example, our next point on the calendar is a July major policy decision meeting. And we haven't had the presentation of all the technical information that should go into those decisions. So, to my mind, it's a real problem. We're on a pace that is not going to allow good decision making.
How do we...
Mr. Chair?
Yes, ma'am.
Having been involved in setting a lot of goals in the last 28 years, I just don't think it's good government to say, we're going to set a year, but at the end of a year from right now, we are not going to perhaps know what the DWR is going to be requiring of us. And so therefore, we all know we're going to let it slide. And I just don't like setting something as, I mean, when people read a goal, this is what it is. I don't think it's good to say, we're going to set this, and then we all know it's going to slip. There's nobody who's complained more about how slow this agency has been, at least in the past, to get things done. But I think everybody's got the idea that this has to be accomplished much sooner than a lot of other things have happened. I think 18 months is a much more realistic goal.
Then, when did you say the one-year clock starts?
As soon as you turn us loose on the work plan.
And
Which we haven't done yet.
which
No.
we haven't done yet.
Oh.
So we've already slipped three. This.
3 months.
Yeah, well, but we said that when we put that in place. We asked staff, could you do a one-year plan? They said, yes, once you turn us loose on the work plan. We're getting to that point, so that.
I should
that is
also
going-
add that we've been heavily involved with DWR in the legislation. We think we have a pretty good idea of what goes in there. We've got a draft of what they are going to require. It's not like we don't have a map. There may be some gaps that have to be filled later, but we know the big things, and I think Chairman Mulhart, you mentioned them. That's the first. The first is what's the size of the pie.
Yeah, John.
So just for understanding purposes, if the time or the clock starts, we have 12 months to do it, is that it? And then
Well, that's the goal.
that's the goal to do it, and then if we don't do it, then there's no penalties or...
No, it's purely us
It's
setting
just
our
purely-
own, it's a limit to ourselves.
No, the goal is like my daughter's idea of a budget.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, so then that we set up that goal, and staff can do that? You believe you can do that?
We can balance those three things in the way that they can be balanced in 12 months. So,
But
if you don't like the quality, you might have to increase the contribution to consultants, for example.
So at the end of 1 year, if we need 6 more months, then we can add this.
Or if you don't think the quality that's coming out in the 12 months is sufficient, you can increase the time. You're balancing those three things. This is a management game right now. Quality,
we don't-
time, and cost.
Whether or not the goal is 12 months, 36 months, or something different doesn't really make any difference to whether or not we move forward with the technical advisory committee.
Correct.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
In fact,
Is it time for motion?
well, let me go through this comment here, if I may, and that is, it may be that when we actually get to that point in our process where we say, yes, we adopt this plan, this work plan, that's when we really need to have that discussion at that point in time. Are we going to limit ourselves to that timeline? So it may be that timeline will have will be able to present itself at a different forum when in fact the work schedule is in front of us, and maybe that's the appropriate thing. Obviously, we've had a good discussion on it. Obviously, you've heard some input from a couple of members that are concerned that is totally artificial and shouldn't be adopted that way. Let's deal with that then when we get to that work plan. Okay? Everybody with that? Let's talk about groups for a second. I think you've heard, the folks in the audience have heard from all of us that having groups deal with the particulars in their area is a good thing. We've said that all along. What we're concerned about, and I think what Steve is concerned about, and I think what he addressed is that rather than the board going out and saying, okay, we're going to create a group, and we're going to designate this group as a source of our answer, or this group as a source of an answer, or this group, we get into the process of beginning to pick who is on or off, in or out of a group. And I would agree with Steve. I think that's a dangerous process for us to go through. If everybody wants to team up within their particular little group, that's their choice. At some point in time, those groups, collectively, individually, or whatever, will have a forum in which to make comments on the draft plan that staff has put together, and we'll either do that at a regular meeting or a specific meeting for that purpose. So every group, whatever groups are out there, how many groups you want, I don't particularly care. I think it's healthy to have the big discussion, but at the The push will come when we finally get to that point in time where the board is called upon to make a decision to move forward. That's when those groups need to report out, if not sooner, and that's when we take all their input. And that way, we're not gaming the system of creating groups per se. And so that would lead me to say, having group meetings and putting all these different groups together, I encourage that. Having a meeting-specific date. Wednesday is problematic for Charlotte, and in all fairness to Charlotte, it's been problematic because of Camarillo City Council. So what we may have to do is look at a specific date to deal with GSP issues, special board meeting just on that issue. As far as TAG, I believe that TAG needs to be a technical group that deals with technical issues. And yes, we have multiple basins in the area, but I submit to you, you have heard enough presentations by the technical people at different topic areas that they all have some understanding of the interrelation, if any, of the different basins as they cross boundaries, and it's purely a technical discussion. So I would support having at least the 5 that the board as outlined by staff. And then, if necessary, after hearing how much workload they had and input from them on how much input, how complicated the issue is, or if there's a certain disagreement, it always leaves the board the ability to add another member for that specific item if necessary. And then the process will grow only as needed. And because I'm concerned about being able to have a process of 10 or 12 individuals, I just don't see getting anything done with that large of a group. Not if we keep TAG in the technical side of the equation. So, how would you?
Well, this item is on the TAG. We
This
have
item
the
is on
work
the tag.
plan that we have to go back to
Right.
on
Yes.
item 5.
Yes.
So that's the stakeholder group.
I'm,
Go ahead.
Shall I-
Go ahead.
I'll move then that the board directs staff to proceed to develop a GSP technical advisory group based on the minimum qualifications that are specified in the board memo and the
Professional, not
yes, no, the
water resources.
well, that's an addition, if you'll notice. It says in addition. It requires both. It requires both a professional credential as well as knowledge in those specific areas. The invitees to be designated as specified in the board memo as well, with the addition of, and ask that a representative from Callegas and a representative of the environmental community be invited to designate qualified personnel to participate in the committee. That's my motion.
Okay, that's the motion. What if the individual that the pumpers group is the same one that Callegas would represent?
In the end, there's only going to be so many people. If you and I each submitted the same person, then either one of us would have to propose somebody else, or there'd be one less member of the committee. That's all.
Okay.
So you are recommending that it be a 7-member committee?
Yes.
Okay.
There's only 5 board members.
Pardon?
5 board members, a representative from Callegas, a representative from the environmental community.
So it'll be the 5 members that the board's going to pick, that one individual and then plus another one?
Yes.
Okay, here,
Okay.
all right, here's my concern. My concern is...
Well, we don't have a second to discuss
Oh,
it.
okay. Well, first of all, I'm not hearing a second, so let's just have a discussion, if we may. My concern is that the original, the 5 are tied to how the agency was formed. The staff is recommending that we round it out with some public member or member representing a non-governmental or environmental organization. That would be the environmental one that you've recommended. I'm okay with that. My concern is that we've now taken one entity within the agency boundaries and effectively added a individual for them. So playing devil's advocate, I would say, well, why not Oxnard? Oxnard's the biggest city in the county. Why not Pleasant Valley? Because Pleasant Valley has been around since about 1952 or 53.
Well, in truth, my original suggestion was going to be to include all those people, until I was persuaded that that might be too many for the board to tolerate.
Here's my compromise, if I may. I would propose that we have, as staff has recommended, the 5 of us, okay?
Of us recommend,
Recommending,
us.
yeah, each of the entities that we represent,
Chair Maher,
plus, yes,
just a point of clarification in case all of your board members don't understand, but Chair West represents Kaigas and could appoint the Kaigas member, just so you know.
yes. So what we have is, we have 5 that staff has recommended, plus the recommendation of 1 who represents a technical person who deals with the environmental issues or represents environmentals. I would recommend that those, either the 5 that we recommend, select an additional independent member. And that independent member is being selected by those 5 and not by us in any shape or form, and would bring in additional expertise as they see fit. That would get you to your 7 members. That way, this board is not picking and saying, well, Kiegas gets an extra bite at the apple and not PV, and not and to expand it, if you go the other logic is you expand it and you have 10 folks across the board. I think that's way too much.
Yeah.
If the group of 7 determines that their workload is such that they need some additional technical expertise, they always come before the board and say, look, this is not working. They come before staff, this is not working. So let's not create a giant entity. Let's start small and see where it takes us. And if it's not enough, they will come to staff will come to the board, and we'll make a decision then. So
Let me make a motion for what you said. The 5 as recommended in here, this 5 who would be named by board members, 1 representing the entire environmental community with the same requirements as specified in here for committee membership, and 1, excuse me, 1 selected by the appointed board members.
The appointed TAC board members to
Yes.
select 1 additional independent. Can we do that? Al's giving me a...
I was just going to ask the question, how would the environmental representative be selected?
This is part of the problem I see with that plan. Let me throw into something else into the discussion pit. 7 members of the TAC. Let's set it at 7. 1 from each of the basins: Las Posas, Oxnard Plain, Forebay, Santa Rosa, PV, Environment, and 1 public member. The 6 positions, including Environment, select the public member.
Well, why don't you just simply...
And then staff presents us the list of those 7. You can, as many people as want can submit their qualifications, and then a short list is given to us. That way we've got all the basins represented, and then that takes care of the membership issue.
Yeah, I'm less concerned about getting every basin represented. I'm more interested in the science than I am in the address of the particular technicians. And rather than leave it as vague as a public member, maybe a better alternative would be to invite the university to propose engineering staff.
Which university?
Cal State Channel Islands.
Well, they don't have any engineering staff right yet.
I thought they did.
I think it's still in the budget, $500,000 to develop a plan.
I see.
The reason I think this basin-specific is a good idea is because you have individuals in this county who've spent considerable time studying their areas. You've got United, who has staff who've done considerable studies and have come up with quite a knowledge base of the Forebay. Callegas has spent a lot of money and time studying the Las Posas basins. And for those, perhaps it wouldn't happen. Perhaps, in fact, the board would select people from those areas. But it seems to me we get a better quality product when we have individuals with specific knowledge of the areas where they work.
Yeah, I disagree. I think you get a better quality product with better quality professionals, not somebody who's already got a vested interest in the data. That independence will give you the quality, not another group of interested participants.
I agree with Gene. I believe that the individuals, the five, should be selected, appointed by the entity that we each individually represent, right? Not a big pile where we choose out of that pile. It's United's decision who should be the United, the county, the cities, the pumpers, and the ag community. So that one's done. That's takes care of that. The issue that was raised, that Al raised, is who appoints somebody that has environmental. What I would propose is that group of five, they select two representatives, two independent representatives. One who has knowledge and experience and credentials to represent correctly the environmental community, and one whose credentials are broad-based, who is independent, and that gives you your seven-man board. And if that seven-man board functions, we'll find out from Al how that board can function, and that whole process that committee will go through will not be to make policy, it'll be to make technical recommendations. Whatever technical stuff they do, it's going to be made available to the community as part of adopting a GSP. It is in the GSP adoption process, the public outreach process, that everybody in the Blue Moon can stand up and say, you didn't look at zone XYZ correctly, and you're technically wrong. Oops, we goofed. That's the check and balance. So there will be a check and balance because there's two separate groups. This is purely technical, not policy. When we adopt the plan, it's all policy because it'll become the roadmap for the future. So my recommendation would be that we stay with staff's recommendation of five. The first task of that five will be to select two additional representatives, one who has a lot of experience in the environmental side of water policy, and another who is an independent.
Okay, so I took what you said and made a motion, nobody seconded it. So if that was a motion, I will second it.
That will be my motion.
I mean, we've spent
All right.
an hour and 20 minutes on this item, and we got a lot of other items to go.
That's good.
Well, in defense, it's an important item. Sean.
It is.
And it's
It
one
is.
that really is going to set our plan up for
But we got the
success.
plan coming up 2 items before this one.
All right. So that will be my motion.
Chair Mulhart,
Yes.
and will the motion also include the other recommendation in the staff report, which is to authorize staff to proceed with the stakeholder participation process as otherwise outlined in the board letter?
The stakeholder process.
I think Al's referring to the written statement. It's the notice that we have to provide, correct? Al?
Oh, okay. Yes, you have to give a written statement of stakeholder process, but I think the stakeholder process we've described here as we haven't voted on it, but one of the comments we had was that it'll be broad in structure before the board. There could be all kinds of groups. Do your thing. Figure out what you want. There will be a forum for you to have your day heard, and we will go through it with that process. So do you want that included in the motion? I'll
Yeah.
include that in the motion.
And
Do I
then
have
the last item was, which Al is going to come back to with his interpretation, is Brown Act question.
Okay.
Public
So
input.
it's 3 items. The formation of the task, 5 to select 2, the written statement of the outreach, recognizing that we're redefining how that's going to work so that everybody has a voice in it. And you're going to give us some definition of the of the Brown Act, where we can go and what we can do with the Brown Act if it applies. Okay? That's my motion.
And Mr. Chair.
I seconded that.
No, go ahead, let's go ahead and vote, but
Okay,
I'll
all right, yeah.
make a comment after that.
All right. Is that a second?
Ah.
Okay, now, John.
No, I just want to, so the tag's going to be advisory to the board, and also the stakeholders are going to be advisory to,
Right.
they're just going to be commenting to the tag and to the board, or?
The concept was that after a first draft of the plan was written, there would be an extensive stakeholder process where people could make comments, and then
Okay.
they would be received and folded into the revision of the document.
Okay, good, thank you.
Okay, that's the motion, a second. Any other? Jessica?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Zaragoza?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to item number 2, and we'll just go item, now that they've been moved down to regular items, we're going to go through items 2, 3, 5, 6, and then 8. Okay? Charlotte, if we get close to you having to leave and you want us to move up 8, since you're here, we can do that. So, would you rather us do that now?
No, I thought the order that you had was good.
Okay, so let's
But
do
let's
that.
do 2.
Sorry, let's do 2. Let's see if we can make them quick.
Good afternoon, Chairman Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Kathleen Rydell. I'm here to present item 2. It's the agency annual report for calendar year 2014. The report was prepared to fulfill the requirements in the enabling legislation that an annual report be prepared. The annual report describes the agency's technical, administrative, and groundwater management and fiscal activities for the year. And you should have a copy of the report. The report was uploaded to our website on last Friday, and it was also emailed out to those who were on our correspondence list. So, as you thumb through this year's annual report, you will see some changes. One of the changes is the tables and figures are incorporated into the text. We have also updated some of the organization within the report, and we have added a new section that includes the health of the basins. In addition, with all the non-responders that have been, we've gotten responses from them since the 2013 report, the production numbers, the extraction numbers from 2009 and 2013, all those new numbers have been incorporated into the tables and figures in this 2014 report. So going over the 2014 data, and this is the familiar figure 4, the bar graphs at the bottom are rainfall. You'll see that 2014 is the 4th year of below average rainfall. And as you look at the the line graph at the top, that's annual extractions. You'll see that 2014 is the second highest extractions reported within the agency since 1991. That it was only exceeded by 2013 reported extractions. Looking at the basins, we have them color-coded by the quantity of water that was extracted from the basin. The greatest extractions were for the Oxnard Plain, followed by the Forebay, Pleasant Valley Basin, and the East Las Postas Basin. We have pie charts on this figure 5 that reflect the use of the water that was extracted from the basins. 71% of the groundwater that was extracted within the agency was used for agricultural purposes, and 29% were used for municipal and industrial uses. And domestic represents 0.2% of the groundwater that was extracted in 2014. As we closed out with the adoption of Emergency Ordinance E, the allocations systems transitioned mid-year. And to close out the books on irrigation allowance that moved over, all agricultural operators are now going to be filing under a modified irrigation allowance index. But to close out the old system, 211 irrigation allowance index applications were filed. And with the adoption of Emergency Ordinance E, credits are no longer being used. So as of the adoption of Emergency Ordinance E, conservation credits are no longer earned and are no longer being available. So to close out in 2014, more conservation credits were used than were earned. And looking at that number, the net of 8,551 acre feet, of that 3,700 acre feet of credits was used by the Pleasant Valley County Water District, and 3,400 of that was the United Water Conservation District associated with the pumping trough pipeline. So those were the major users of credits. And then you can see how the credit balance ended up. So I can go further into the highlights. That's all put and listed in the board letter. So we could dispense with that. And any questions?
Let me deal with questions. Anybody have any questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions, comments? Okay, this one is a receive and file. A motion, please.
So move.
And since, in a second, we had it. Al, just to remind me, because we moved it into regular meeting, I have to do a roll call on this?
No.
Okay. All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, Rick, number 3. Thank you, Kathleen.
Good afternoon, Chair Mulhart and directors. For the record, my name is Rick Viergoots. I'll be presenting item number 3 today. So this item has to do with the addition of an irrigation allowance for a cover crop. How come we're talking about it? We're talking about it because during all the outreach following Emergency Ordinance E, we found that a number of technical and administrative changes or clarifications needed to be made to the irrigation allowance system. We've done most of that, but a couple remaining issues have to do with additional crops. The most important one is the need for a cover crop. And so we're asking your board today to adopt an additional water allowance for a cover crop. So cover crops are necessary for soil health. Not all growers grow cover crops. Some do. Staff spent significant time with the growers group and also had input with UC Cooperative Extension in developing the number today. We used mustard as a cover crop. We felt that was the most representative. We also used the University of California's basic irrigation scheduling application as a guide. Very simply, we estimated the allowance, or we developed the allowance. We used the crop coefficient and a reference crop. We didn't add in additional water for distribution uniformity, frost protection, and salinity control. We keyed it to the existing reference crop, which is sod. And the approach is fairly straightforward. It uses an existing crop category as a reference crop for each zone and year type. And so we have 9 separate values, and by doing it this way, we're not reinventing new information. We're using readily available information. The proposed water allowances are in the table below. They're in your board letter. And in conclusion, the addition of a cover crop category will allow growers to report more correctly. For those growers that grow cover crops, they can report a cover crop. The allowance is the second lowest irrigation allowance, just for reference. And the addition of the cover crop allowance doesn't change the agency's overall cap on extractions in the agency. And that's all I have.
Okay.
Rick, so if I could just clarify, my understanding of this is that it allows growers to more accurately report all water usage on the land, including that for cover crops.
That's correct.
Okay.
Okay. Dave? Anybody else have any questions on that? You want to make a motion?
Move to approve.
Second.
Okay. This one we'll do as any discussion on that? Anybody in the audience on this item? Jessica, we'll do this as a roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Zaragoza?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, let's go to item number 5. Gerhard.
Get set up here. Okay, Gerhard Hubner again for the record, presenting this item. This is item number 5. This is our draft agency fiscal year 15-16 work plan and budget. So how did we get here today? Well, as you recall, back in April, we brought you a draft preliminary budget and work plan that was a part of the convergence of 3 different issues. We also came back in May of this year and provided you with the direction and intent to pursue a 1-year GSP. So today's plan is to incorporate all the above direction as well as direction from the fiscal committee. So these are the fiscal committee recommendations. The fiscal committee met on June 4th, 2015. The fiscal committee, as you recall, is represented by 2 directors, Chair Mulhart and Director Borchert. Director Borchert chairs that committee. So I've listed in these 2 slides what the recommendations are. And essentially, these are the minutes or the motion direction that came out of the meeting. First one, as you can read, it's to segregate future pumping surcharges into a separate line item from penalties to allow the board to use the penalties where used most. And specifically...
Excuse me, Garrett. Could you speak up a little bit? I'm having a hard time hearing everything you're saying.
Sure. So the first one, segregate the surcharge monies from the penalties, create a separate line item within the budget. And use that money for future projects, water supply projects in particular, planning, design. That was the intent, as I recall.
I'm glad you clarified that because that's a particularly important item that the board letter didn't read that way.
And I clarify it because agency counsel wanted me to be very careful not to say the money would actually go to specific water supply projects that we would build. So we left it a little bit vaguer for that reason.
Correct me if I'm wrong, Chairman Millard, but it was the concept of going to new supply or incentivizing new supply.
Yes.
Okay. Second bullet, the pump charges would be increased to cover the agency's new authority or increased authority under SGMA. The fourth recommendation was to transfer $500,000 from our current fund balance to the GEMS, or the litigation reserve account, so for a total of $1.5 million. And a future policy, or a policy that this board, if you endorse today, would be to maintain a fiscal reserve equal to 1 year of operating expense. So currently it's approximately $1 million. Further recommendations. We brought before, and this was again a direction to look at what we wouldn't do if we just had to do the GSP plan. So the staff put together a number of items in terms of what we could or could not do. The committee, however, did feel and recommended that we continue with our meter calibration program and our emergency ordinance implementation. They also instructed us to bring grants that pertain to the groundwater sustainability plan development to the board if needed. Refocus any public outreach that we're currently doing towards the GSP development. Increase staff to support current and future agency activities. And then to present this work plan, or now revised work plan, and 3 alternative budgets based on a 1250 and 15 acre foot budget scenario, revenue scenario for review at today's meeting. So, a few numbers. Starting balance, and you have the spreadsheet. So I want to clarify, we did send out to the board revised spreadsheets I think it was on, Jessica, it was Tuesday. We did have essentially one clarification. It didn't change the bottom line. It was felt, I got some input, that it was felt that to put the $1 million operating reserve in the designated account to make that very clear. So we did that. Again, it didn't change any of the numbers, but you can see that now with the sheets that you have before you. Okay, so starting balance, almost 3.7 million. We've put now, and you can see we have a designated funds. We've moved where the GEMS litigation fund was on the budget spreadsheet below. We've moved that up. We've created a separate line item for the surcharges, and as I just described, the operating reserves at $1 million. If you look at the revenue, we anticipate, again, budgeting estimates, 860,000, and this is based on a $6 per acre foot. I'll describe that in my next slide, but that's based on our current pumping charge of $6 an acre foot. And then you can see the bottom line in terms of the total operating expenditures for the year, including contingency. So these are the revenue assumptions. I mentioned the $6 per acre foot, 125 times that by 125 acre foot extractions. That's the average, essentially the average. We've used that in past years. That equals to $750,000. Interest of approximately $10,000. Surcharge penalties. This one's a little tough to estimate. As you recall, in the past, we relied on surcharges and some of our settlement monies. We funded the agency's operation. Settlement monies are now exhausted or essentially been accounted for. We've received all that we're going to under the Miller and the other, in the Howling settlement. And we don't anticipate with one of the big surcharger payees going forth receiving that kind of revenue. So surcharges, we put down a value. That one's could be realized, maybe less, maybe slightly less, lower. And in the out years, we don't have anything for surcharges. Again, something that you necessarily don't want to rely on, something we want to account for but not necessarily rely on. So, if you were to, and as you see in the sheet, if you were to rely on the $6 per acre foot, you would have to deplete the entire carryover fund or correspondingly maintain a reserve. You would need a higher pump charge. Fiscal Committee recognized this and recommended that the board consider increasing the existing pump charge. I mentioned that as in the recommendations in the first slide. Therefore, as I mentioned earlier, so that you would have options to consider today, we not only gave you the $6 an acre foot spreadsheet with the revenue, we've given you the other 3 revenue scenarios. Simple calculation. The item I put in blue, that's a correction I need to make in the board letter. That math was not correct, so that's the correct value. When you do the $10 times the 124,000 acre foot, it gives you $1.25 million in revenue. So this is some of the analysis. If you look at each of the additional pump charge scenarios, at the $10 pump charge, you would use the entire carryover funds, fund our operating costs, development of a groundwater sustainability plan, and create the minimum operating reserve. So that essentially would take care of that. You go to the $12.50, would maintain, again, the minimum operating reserve and our operating costs, but anything that you would want in terms of future sustainability activity studies and long-term, it would be limited. At 15, you would have the maximum flexibility to meet all the obligations, including the minimum reserve, operating costs, and then fund some of the short and long-term activities. Due to the noticing requirements under SGMA and the timing, we couldn't bring you a companion increase. If you wanted to necessarily increase it today, we couldn't do that. On advice of agency counsel, we have to do specific noticing requirements. It's every 2 weeks. So if you today decided to go with a higher pump charge, we would bring that back to you at the July meeting. So turning to the work plan. It's organized as we have in the past, 2 sections. First section is our core services, organized by administrative and fiscal services, record, technical. We have our legal, of course. New this year, we've added a separate item for public outreach, recognizing that we're doing more in that regard. The section 2 is the additional work, or we're past sort of our long-term efforts. This year, that's to support our GSP development and our inspection program. What we've done as well is we've taken the work plan, and I believe you have the markup strikeout, so you can see where the changes we've made to accommodate the direction that you've made to us in the past, or direction you've provided to us in the past.
Stealing from John.
So we've eliminated items where you've given us direction and included items where we felt that you wanted us to work on that specific task this year.
Okay.
Some of the work plan assumptions. Full-time equivalent is 1,800 hours. We use a blending rate for estimating at $90 an hour. You can see the total hours from the section 1, the core services, at 8,000 and slightly 1,560 in the section 2. Our central service charge is 61,400, and that all combines to give you the public works charges. I've listed some of the major items separate from the GSP development and some of those items. These are some of the new expenses, or let me put it better stated, some of these are ongoing expenses, and a few of them are new. So outreach and training facilitator, we're proposing at least a placeholder for $5,000 as a facilitator that may help us in the GSP development process. We would come back to your board with perhaps a separate item to describe that. The $43,000 is for our IT service, some of the maintenance fees that we incur, and a few enhancements that we feel will be necessary. We've talked about the well inspection program. That was a separate item in front of you last month. You've heard from LPUG about their water feasibility study. The $125,000 is the half of, and the other half would come from Cayugas. It's a $250,000 study. I have a few contingency funds, consultant contracts, $30,000, $35,000 for outside legal counsel, and then we have our standard $100,000 for operating contingency. So moving on to our long-term issues, there are 3. We've placed $50,000 for the groundwater sustainability plan. This is the overall plan development. It includes all the different elements. It would include basin-specific characterization. It would include the water budget, the sustainability, and the yield, and be the comprehensive effort.
You said 50. Yeah.
I'm sorry, $500,000.
Yes, but you said 50, and no one in the audience blinked. Now,
Go.
He just wanted to know if we were listening.
well, we were, but no one blinked. Okay. Yeah.
The next one, $350,000. This is the sustainable yield analysis, or including the water budget and determination for the 7 subbasins. So we'd be looking at all our 7 basins. I envision today that it would be chapters on each, with the characterization and yield and as much information and data that we have on all of our 7 basins. And we've put the placeholder for allocation systems. This would be looking at the allocation systems that are out there, what are working, what's not working, looking at their merits and determining if we should replace ours, or perhaps we make a recommendation that what we have currently works or can be modified. So, in conclusion, we welcome your agency's board members and stakeholder feedback, comment on our fiscal work plan and our budget. We are anxious for you to consider and perhaps adopt it today, with the fiscal year starting on July 1st. And also corresponding direction from you on what pump charge you would like to propose. Again, if you wish to raise that, we would come back at a future board meeting, or the July board meeting with a resolution and do the proper public notification that's required under SGMA. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, ma'am.
has the fiscal committee made a recommendation regarding the pumping charges increases from?
Let me, excellent question. Dave?
Why don't I brief the board a little bit more about my vision of what happened. Gerhard stated it very accurately, I think, and I thought the board letter was very accurately presented as well, with the addition of that correction I made up front, that we talked about segregating those future surcharges, which are overpumping of allocation, to going back to subsidizing and incentivizing new supply in some manner. The other thing I would mention is that in part of that discussion, and actually Rob Saperstein brought it up, it was a concept of, we've got this big budget, they've indicated how we've proposed to parse it out. $500,000 to the GEMS fund, $1 million for the GSP, $1 million in reserve. It leaves $700,000. And it was a concept that was discussed, and I think we agreed that we would take that remaining surplus of the agency budget and also turn that around back into the country to incentivize new supply or perhaps conservation. Do I have that right, Chair Mahoney? That's the only addition I would make to what the presentation you heard.
I will comment. I think Rob was. I saw him chuckle back there when Dave said his name, but it was true. And I think
kind of ironic. Here I am proposing a pump charge increase. It's not lost on me at all.
Yeah, it's not lost on us. You know, it's not often that we're talking to Rob. He's always talking to us. So, but I thought, Rob, for the benefit of everybody in the room, I thought your comments were correct, and essentially, and I'll let you restate it if I state it wrong. His comment was that we have got to get serious about managing and running this agency, and if we're concerned about raising a rate $2-3, we're looking at huge, significant expenditures coming down the road. I think I've said a number of meetings that United alone over the next 10 years is going to be faced with $350 to $400 million worth of capital improvement projects mandated by all kinds of folks that doesn't produce one new drop of water. So the issue of funding an agency and making sure that agency stands on its own and is able to function to somehow try to bring fairness to everything we're doing so that everybody is hopefully treated fairly, or at least in a common sense. We've got to spend the money to do that. And did I paraphrase that fairly correctly? And in fact, with that, I'll open it to the public. So if anybody wants to make comments about what staff has reported and what we're recommending. Jim.
Particular, I'd like to hear comments on the pump rate.
The pump rate, yeah.
What that charge ought to be.
Yeah.
Good afternoon, James Dubois with Driscoll's. I just had a couple quick comments. We agree that the agency's projected operating costs ought to be covered by pump charges, and that surcharges ought to finance supply, replenishment, efficiency projects, whether that's grants for equipment, training, whatever it may be. However, if the pump charge is to be increased, we'd like to see assurances that surcharge monies collected will go towards supply replenishment and efficiency, these types of projects. We'd like to see some specificity there. It was put up on the screen here, as well as in the fiscal year work plan and budget. I'm looking at page 1, item 1, segregate future overpumping surcharges into separate line item from penalties to allow the board to use funds where needed the most. I feel like it's still too open-ended. I know it was mentioned, but so with revisions to that language, it's something that we would support.
Okay.
Thanks.
Anybody else want to make some comments? Yes, sir.
My name is Terry Foreman, member of the public, and I just have a question to understand. There was talk about a staff increase in the budget, but I didn't see what the number was from and to, so if someone could just explain that. I couldn't do the math sitting there with the numbers.
Gerhard?
And then are those staff will be county employees and not agency employees, I assume?
Well,
Would they be hiring, wasn't clear, would they be hiring employees, or are they just going to be using other county employees?
Okay. All employees of the agency are county employees under contract to the agencies.
Okay.
So how the county, and it may be, and in fact that issue came up, it may be that that is not an individual, but it is a full-time individual equivalent.
Right.
So it gives staff the flexibility for the particular skill set they need for the particular issue they're dealing with. They take that and do it that way. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
that's why the staff report specifically said a full-time equivalent.
Right. I just couldn't make the jump from how many of those are current to how many is being proposed.
Yeah. And Gerhard will answer your question, but first a question for you. Is it going to rain this year? I need to know.
Well, you saw the orange crab down in San Diego and in Orange County. So, yes.
Oh, good. Thank you.
At least once.
Chair Mulhall, you answered it correctly. I don't need to really expand on it. We're looking at that. We have the flexibility, not necessarily one person, but it could be within the district, pulling a variety of skill sets. And
It could be a consultant. So we're still wrestling with that internally.
Okay.
It could be a mixture of all.
Again, the GMA contracts for full-time equivalents to accomplish its mission, and we've authorized the expenditure of a full-time equivalent. And for staff to figure out exactly how they want to constitute that, that's really a staffing issue for Jeff and to figure out. Okay.
And
Was there a number, a current number versus two?
How many FTEs
How
do we
many?
currently have?
Give them that. That's what we want.
well, you're looking at there's one, two, there. You have 3 dedicated, and you have several part-timers. So,
yeah.
Do we know how many FTEs?
So what, 5? Or?
So what's the total?
I think what he's asking is what's the difference in hours that we currently do versus the hours that are projected. The hours that are projected about 5.3. I don't know that we have a firm number on what we currently use. It's in the 4+ range. So that one, we can get you that, Terry.
yeah.
Okay.
But this is not a body. It's just equivalent to. Right?
Yes.
Right.
Okay. Okay. Rob.
Rob Saperstein for City of Oxnard. Something's wrong if you're quoting me back there. This feels a little bit like what my wife does when she wants to set me up. Plausible deniability.
I want you all to blame Rob.
If it works well, it's your idea. If it doesn't work well, it was my idea.
Yeah.
The perspective from which my comments came in the Finance Committee are really the same that I'd make here, the same I'd make in the prior agenda item on the work plan itself. The agency just needs to be serious in communicating to the constituents what it's going to take to do what's needed to manage this basin, so that the constituents can then come back and say that's acceptable or that's not. And from the city's perspective, what's honest and what needs to happen to manage this basin is going to be a dramatically different package than what's happened in the past 20 years. And this agency, if it's going to be the sustainability agency, will not be able to do it at $3 an acre foot, and we won't be able to have arguments over should it be 25 cents an acre foot increase. That will completely miss the point of what has to be done. And really the next conversation, and this was hinted at, or maybe not hinted at, you said it directly earlier, Director Mulhart, really what we need to get to as quickly as possible is a replenishment assessment that will be on the order of $200 an acre foot. That's the honest answer to the pumping community, and I'd rather get that communicated to the pumping community sooner than later so that folks can decide what the reaction is going to be. And so to me, the budget is really tied to the preparation of the sustainability plan and its implementation. the more the board communicates what the long-term future looks like and leaves open as broad an opportunity for stakeholder participation, the more likely we will have success in this forum instead of being in a litigation setting where it will be more painful and perhaps take longer. So that's where my comments at the Finance Committee came from, and I'd hate to be sort of penny wise, pound foolish in the process.
Yes, and as I said, that I think had a huge impact on all the folks that were there. Myself, I won't speak for Dave, but I believe that was the same impact. So, all right, so we're at a point in time where there's 3 possibilities, and we've been advised by staff that we can't actually adopt that number today. So what level of discussion can we have short of adopting? Can we just no discuss? What discussion can we have?
Well, you can discuss the various options that are set forth in the board letter. This board just cannot adopt those charges today.
So,
We can determine to what option to put on the agenda for the next meeting, though.
Correct.
Okay, all right, good. All right, so there are 3 options, there's 4 options in front of us. And then, in theory, a range of any numbers that are in front of us, because the law allows us to go there.
So, Mr. Chair, just from my understanding, so the $6 is the current, right?
Correct.
So at $10 is not adequate according to the staff report, and at $12.50 it's just minimum, and 15 is where you have some flexibility. So some number between that, is that?
Yeah, and the reality is that as you go up incrementally in that number, it leaves more money that was collected as replenishment, as a surcharge money, to be used for the replenishment process in some form or fashion. So the slower or lower number, the slower you get to a number, or if you don't get to a number, that reserve number just disappears, and we're spending that money to run an agency. Mm-hmm. So that's what they're. Let me ask Dave's the chair of the committee. What is your recommendation?
To clarify for Director Zaragoza, and I don't know if Gerhard could put that slide up again that detailed the staff's opinion of the different rates.
Sure. Can we bring up the presentation, please?
It wasn't that the $10 rate was inadequate. Mm-hmm. It was that it didn't leave surplus. Oh, okay. It's that it adequately funded what we project to be the agency's operating expenses of $1 million a year. It actually exceeds that if you take the.
That's a 1,200 on the.
Well, we've always budgeted based on 125,000 acre-feet of pumping. Mm-hmm. 100,000 acre-feet of pumping, which we've been told is safe yield, times the $10 would give us $1 million. Mm-hmm. So we'd be assessing in pump fees the annual operating expenses of the agency, and in addition carrying a $1 million surplus
the reserves.
In current reserves. So you asked me my opinion. My opinion is the $10 for exactly what I just said. We fund current operations, and then if we are in a position where we decide we need to raise replenishment fees or other things, then we do that and we call it what it is. I'm not for public agencies raising excess funds just to carry. It seeds fears of the public and individuals that shenanigans can take place with excess funds. So I think the $10 adequately funds the projected operating expenses, and we've got the $1 million of operating expenses in reserve. We're setting aside some legal money, and on top of that, we've still got $700,000 extra. So I think we've got plenty of money on hand. So going to that $15 rate at this point seems to be unnecessary to me.
Gene?
I still have a question in my mind about whether or not a $10 pumping fee is reasonable or necessary at this stage. As much as I appreciate reserves, I do have some doubts about why a reserve of a full year's operating budget is necessary for an agency that has no operations. There are expenses, and like I said, I'm not opposed to setting aside the reserves. I'd probably prefer to see a large portion of those used to fund ongoing operations rather than just set aside. And so I have some question about whether it's necessary to go to $10, but I'm not overtly opposed to it.
John or Charlotte?
I was just reading, the staff report here. It says the review alternative budget spreadsheet indicates a $10 charge would not adequately fund the additional work needed to develop a groundwater sustainability and maintain a minimum.
Well, that's a good point, John, but that's at least in my take of this, the funds necessary to develop the GSP are already existing. That doesn't need to be funded out of pumping charges. Those funds are sitting in the account already, have accumulated over time. What we're talking about are ongoing annual operations, and from a budgeting standpoint, we should separate those items out. Because the GSP, the development of the GSP is an extraordinary expense. That's not going to recur every year, but operations will. And so if we're talking about annual operations of $1 million, how much income do you need to, what kind of pumping charge do you need to cover $1 million in annual operating expenses? At 125,000 acre feet, a $10 a pumping charge gives you $1.25 million. So the board memo is correct, but it's misleading. It doesn't create enough funds to operate the agency and develop the plan, but you don't need those extra
So
funds.
they should be separated?
Yes.
Well, okay, I just want to understand this.
Yeah.
Charlotte?
I would say the slide is correct. I'd look at it, it should say the not should be crossed out. So, and the explanation is correct.
Okay.
Charlotte?
Thank you.
Well, I believe we need reserves. I think the $10 will do us. But I just wanted to get out there that I think whether we operate anything or not, I believe that to carry on our mission, we need to have a reserve in case everybody decided not to pump.
Or pay.
Or pay.
Anybody in the audience? Andy.
Andy Waters, LPUG Chair. We discussed this at the meeting this morning. We agree with Director Borcher that $10 is sufficient. We took that $3 million, we split it up so that we have the reserve, so that we have the GSA going forward, and that's where we are today. So that was our... Is it? No handout with that one. It was that easy.
Anybody else? Anybody else?
Gerhard wants.
Just a clarification, something I noticed earlier and totally clarified it for me as well. So we really look at what our operating costs, it's about 1.3. When we had a discussion in front of the fiscal committee, we said it was approximately $1 million because we had estimated some of the public works charges, and some of those charges were less when we added back some of those items. So it's a clarification in terms of how much ongoing expense in subsequent years.
But when we look at the budget and we back out the GSP stuff, it's about 1.1.
Okay.
First of all, I think it's monumental that we're actually talking about getting off the $6 and moving up to at least $10. That's a 60%, 65%, whatever the rough number is. That's a huge increase on a percentage basis. In hard dollars, it's a different number. But conceptually, given how long the agency's been around, to get away from the original $3 limit we had as an agency, the trip that Jurgen and I took to Sacramento to try to get the rate increased, and all we got out of the deal was $6 because of a particular state senator. It is actually an amazing discussion that we're actually at a point in time where we're increasing a rate. So And I also agree with the discussion we had at the committee meeting that we need to separate out those items that are part of a long-term survivability of this agency and of our aquifers, and that's the GSP, the ongoing cost of running the agency, what that number is, and obviously we have to have some form of reserve. And what will happen is that as the GSP is formed and that expense is made to put a GSP in place, there will be another slow, maybe rapid increase in the operation of the agency to manage that plan and make sure that we're staying on that plan. It may mean that we're going to have to add an additional staff member because we now have certain reports we have to give to the state. We have to monitor the sustainability process. We have to monitor the allocation process so that people aren't gaming the system. So the cost of running the agency over time will increase. So that one-time expenditure of $1 million will not mean that that $1 million cost will go away. It may be reallocated in some other form. So I could see, as long as everybody understands, going down the road, we may be coming back in a year and a half from now, whenever we adopt a plan, whatever that timeline is, that we actually have to look at increasing the $10 up to the $12.50 at that point in time. And I think that falls in with what Dave has said, that if we're actually increasing it to run the agency for actual work that's being done and not just carrying giant reserves, it may be that we reach a point in time where the agency says that $1 million is a pretty hefty reserve. We've got experience now, and we can take some of that down and push it back over into the pile of money that we use to help build and fund future projects. All of those, I think, are going to be in play. So I would support the $10. I want people to recognize that this problem, I think Rob is absolutely correct, this problem is not going to get cheaper going forward. It's going to get more expensive going forward because we have to have an agency that can manage the kind of expenditures and the kind of rules and regulations and projects we put in place to get us to that sustainability point. So I'll support the $10. All right. Dave, anybody have any discussion? You want to make a motion? Oh, you can't make you got to.
Well, we want to approve the work plan as presented, do we not?
Yeah. Approve the work plan as presented, and I guess we have to.
And then suggest that staff bring back to us a agenda item for next meeting of increasing the agency's pump charges to $10 an acre foot.
Okay. All right.
And we need to adopt the budget.
And will that include the
The
total
work
budget?
plan and the budget.
And the budget?
That too.
Okay.
Policy recommendation from fiscal committee.
And
work plan and budget.
All right. Wait. Hold on. So we're not jumping all over the place.
What do we have to do?
We have to approve the work plan, the budget, the policy recommendation of the fiscal agency, that is to segregate this out into some specific areas, which is a change for us, and to recommend to staff to bring back at the July meeting a rate increase to $10, a pump charge rate increase to $10 an acre foot.
That's a correct summation.
Is that your motion?
I'll make that motion.
All right, there's a motion
Second.
and a second. Any other discussion? Jessica?
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Zaragoza?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay, Charlotte, you're watching the clock. I have two items. I have a fiscal audit report. How long do you think that'll take, Gerhard?
5 minutes.
And then how long for the North Pleasant Valley groundwater desalter update?
That's a simple update. I don't know if anybody from the city is planning to listen what's here.
We are going to Pleasant Valley.
Okay. So let's, if I may, I think it's important that the full board hear that. So
Yes.
if I may, if with everybody's indulgence, I'd like to go to item 8, right? So we can hear that issue, and then we'll finish up with item 6. And then after that, we have to go to closed session.
Chair Mulhart, directors. My name is Tully Clifford, and I'll just give a quick update on the North Pleasant Valley groundwater desalter. Subsequent to the special board meeting in May, this item has gone before the City of Camarillo City Council, and they approved the environmental impact report on June the 10th. And on that same date, they had a study session trying to bring a couple of the entities together to actually partner on this. This included the City of Camarillo and American Water. So rather than having two relatively large desalter projects, they are now working together to form a partnership to bring one project only. We met with those parties again this week to discuss where they were at, and it looks like they're pulling their technical information together, which will probably result in a revision, an addendum to their environmental impact report to reflect that particular partnerships and the changes in that document, as well as looking at the contingency plan to make sure that the triggers and the actions then that are appropriate with the project being put forth by those proponents. And my understanding is that the Pleasant Valley Mutual Water will not be participating at this time. And so we anticipate then that the partnership between American Water and the city may be ready to come back to the board in July, and if not, we will potentially request a special meeting in August to hear that, seeking approval from the board.
Okay. Yes, sir.
I'm Warren Manzer from Pleasant Valley Mutual Water. Okay, we opted out of that plan simply because they are much more expensive than we are proposing in our desalter plan. Okay. We can produce it the way we already have our iron and manganese removal. We have a first flush system to save water, and we are ready to go with just a plain desalter. We can get it for about $5.75 if we get the full grant. If we don't get the grant, we'll get it at $750 an acre foot. What they are talking about is in the neighborhood of $1,300. We don't think that our stockholders, our shareholders, would like us to spend $800 more for the water. That's why we have opted out of that system.
Okay. And how many acre feet are you talking about?
We are talking, if we don't, we have averaged 1,100 acre feet for all of our water usage from Callegas and our groundwater.
Okay.
We have added a rather more sophisticated filter and pump system to cut our brine line discharge by 50%. And what we would need to cover the brine line and our regular thing is 1,300 acre feet. We would need it by April 1st, 1917, or 2017, okay, 2017, to be online at that time.
That would if you took that, your current pumping plus the additional that you need so that you can discharge brine, you're going to ask for then a variance to increase your pumping?
Yeah, we would need 1,300 acre feet to get the 1,100 that we need so that we wouldn't have to use any of Callegas water, which is also much more expensive.
Okay. At what point in that equation have you increased your pumping?
Not until 2017.
Okay. So what you would do is you would increase pumping, you would increase groundwater pumping to reduce the dependence on Callegas water.
That's right.
Okay. Have you had discussions with staff on this issue? Have you had discussions with staff on this issue? Because
yes,
that requires...
We have replied in a letter to all their questions.
We haven't had any detailed discussions. It's been about this level. We're not sure how they're doing what they're doing. And one thing your board should point out, and maybe staff has this in error, is that you said first come, first serve. So in that sense, the City of Camarillo's proposal is way out ahead with the EIR, and there is a limited resource there. And as I understand the City of Camarillo's proposal at this point, it's to use the full amount of the resource. So these guys need to get moving if they're going to do what they say. And it's not clear to us. 1,100 is what he wants to pump, but what are you pumping right now?
No, he's saying he needs to pump 1,300.
1,300, yeah. How many? 1,300 is what you want to pump. What are you pumping right now?
Sir,
We're pumping the total
Sir?
Callegas and
Jeff,
our own
he's got to be in
groundwater.
front of the microphone. Yeah.
Chair,
Sir.
you got to talk to the microphone.
Sir, you got to be in the...
With the groundwater and Callegas, we're going at 1,100.
Well, we understand that. How much are you pumping right now?
Oh, pumping is right at, with our TEA, we're pumping at about 675.
So
Let me-
that's
All right. Here's the problem. The issues, we're now getting into issues that were not on the agenda. What I'm telling you is that you guys need to start talking to staff, because if you're talking about an increase in pumping allocation, and that's what you're talking about, that's got to come before the board if staff does not recommend it. And so if you're building a system on the assumption that you're going to increase pumping to offset Callegas water, that may not be a valid assumption, so be careful.
Okay, we understand that. We would be using Callegas water if we don't get that allotment.
Okay, so be sure you have conversations with staff.
We started conversations with them a year ago, and we started working on this 2 years ago.
I understand, but I'm telling you, now with the changes that are going on in that area,
I agree.
You need to stay in touch with staff so they know what's
Will do.
going on. Thank you. All right, very good. Okay, anything else on this item? Lucy?
For the record, my name is Lucy McGovern with the City of Camarillo. I don't know if this is working or not. I did want to confirm what your staff has reported, but I'd also wanted to introduce to you Mike Rigby with American Water, who's here, and I don't know if you have a little bit of time just to have him make an introduction on that.
Are we looking at a presentation?
No, just letting you know that American Water is here with us today, and he may be in the future making presentations before the board.
Okay, well, before we do that, okay, from my standpoint, you guys are going in exactly the direction that you need to go. It'll eventually come back to us. So before I go into that presentation, if necessary, what I want to do is I want to cover the agenda items before Charlotte leaves. And so I'd ask that unless there are board members that want to hear that.
I just wanted to let you know that there is an American Water representative here.
Oh, very good. I think you're going in the right direction.
And we're here together.
All right, keep going. All right. So, anything else on this item? Anybody in the audience on this item? Here we go. Okay. Now back to 6, please.
This presentation is very short. This is our...
oh, I'm sorry.
Hudson.
Hold on.
All right.
I need to do a receive and file on that item.
So moved.
A motion?
Second.
Second. Roll call.
Chair Mulhart?
Yes.
Director Craven?
Yes.
Director Zaragoza?
Yes.
Director West?
Yes.
Director Borchert?
Yes.
Okay. Item number 6.
This is item number 6, our fiscal year 2013-14. It actually says annual, but it's actually supposed to say biannual. Make that correction on the introductory slide. So, back in September 2013, your board determined and approved the agency conversion to a biannual audit schedule. In August of 2014, we sent out, or Central Services sent out 21 requests for proposal asking for audit services. We received one proposal from, if I can even pronounce it, Fettler and Company, and they submitted a proposal which we brought before your board in September, and you approved that. But here's the bottom line. The auditor's findings directly out of the report, in their opinion, the financial statements that relate to the above present fare and in material respects, financial positions of the Fox Canyon GMA board management agency as of June 30th, 2014 and 13, and changes in its financial position and cash flows from that year ended in conformity with the accounting principles generally accepted in the United States of America.
Okay.
Lastly, they included a schedule of findings and responses. This is from the previous audit report. They had to look at it. They determined that we're actually implementing that. They did make that determination as well. So, conclusion, you have our biannual audit report. It's an independent contract auditor. It's before you as a receive and file. It did find that the agency respective changes for the financial position and cash flows as presented for those fiscal years were in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles, and there was no new findings in this year's audit report. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Anybody have any questions? Anybody in the audience have any questions?
Move to receive and file.
Second.
Okay, motion is second. Al, you have to explain it. I can do that. Do I have to actually get a full vote or in this section?
Receive and files can be approved by voice vote.
Okay, very good. Do I hear any objection? Hearing none, so ordered. Okay, we have one item into closed session, and then following closed session, we have the executive officer's report. Al, am I permitted to receive and file the executive officer's report? And are we going to, anything we have to brief out of closed session?
There will not be any report out of closed session.
Okay, can I have a motion to receive and file?
So move.
Motion and a second, and there's the second. Any objection? So ordered. All right, we're going to go into closed session. Thank you.